The film set was supposed to be a place of controlled chaos, but on this particular afternoon in 1967, chaos was about to become something else entirely. 8 seconds. That's all it would take for Bruce Lee to turn skepticism into silence, doubt into disbelief, and arrogance into a lesson that would echo through Hollywood for decades. 8 seconds to prove that some things don't need long explanations. They need demonstrations. 8 seconds to show that the difference between talking about mastery and possessing it is the distance between thought and action. But those 8 seconds didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because someone decided that Bruce Lee, all 5 feet 7 inches and 135 pounds of him, couldn't possibly be what people said he was. The 20th Century Fox backlot sprawled across West Los Angeles like a small city unto itself, a maze of false fronts and real ambitions. Stage 9 sat near the eastern edge, a massive soundstage where Roman Polanski was shooting The Fearless Vampire Killers, a horror comedy that would later be remembered more for its troubled production than its box office returns. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of makeup powder, hot stage lights, and coffee that had been sitting too long on burners. Cables snaked across the floor in organized tangles. Crew members moved with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times, adjusting lights, marking positions, checking continuity. Sharon Tate stood near the craft services table, her blonde hair catching the overhead lights as she laughed at something a grip had said. She was 24, beautiful in that effortless way that made cameras love her, still months away from marrying Polanski, years away from becoming a name everyone would know for all the wrong reasons. And she was waiting for her friend. Bruce Lee arrived at 2:47 p.m., moving through the soundstage with that distinctive walk, shoulders back, head high, each step deliberate and centered. He wore black pants and a dark blue collared shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they'd been carved from teak. At 26, he was teaching martial arts to Hollywood's elite, training Steve McQueen and James Coburn, trying to break into an industry that saw Asian men as houseboys and villains, rarely as leading men, never as action heroes. Sharon waved him over, her smile genuine and warm. They'd met through Jay Sebring, the celebrity hairstylist who studied Jeet Kune Do at Bruce's school in Chinatown. In a town built on superficial connections, their friendship had the rare quality of actual affection. "You made it," she said, giving him a quick hug. "I was starting to think you'd gotten lost." "Los Angeles traffic," Bruce replied, his voice carrying that slight accent that Hollywood casting directors always mentioned in their rejection notes. "It fights back harder than most of my students." She laughed, then gestured around the set. "Welcome to organized madness. Roman's on a break, but he should be back soon. He's really excited to meet you. He's seen the footage from the Green Hornet." Bruce nodded, though his expression remained neutral. The Green Hornet had been both his breakthrough and his limitation. He'd stolen every scene as Kato, the sidekick who barely spoke but moved like lightning. But Hollywood still saw him as a sidekick, not a star. The show had been canceled after one season. Now he was back to teaching, to demonstrating, to proving himself over and over to people who could never quite believe what they were seeing. The soundstage bustled with activity, but Bruce noticed something else. The attention, crew members glancing his way, then quickly looking back to their work. A few stuntmen clustered near the far wall, their conversation pausing as they registered his presence. In Hollywood, everyone was always watching everyone else. It was a town built on hierarchies, on who mattered and who didn't, on who could do what and who was pretending. Bruce had learned to feel those looks, to measure the weight of skepticism in a room. Sharon was saying something about the film's schedule when one of the stuntmen detached from his group and started walking toward them. He was tall, 6'2" at least, with the build of someone who played college football and stayed in shape afterward. Sandy blonde hair, strong jaw, the kind of conventional American handsomeness that opened doors in this town. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt that showed off his arms, and he moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told he didn't belong. His name was Rick Vandermeer, though Bruce didn't know that yet. Second-generation stuntman, son of a legendary Hollywood cowboy who doubled for John Wayne. Rick had been falling off horses and through windows since he was 16, had taken hits from the best stunt coordinators in the business, had credentials that ran deep in an industry that valued lineage. He also had opinions about martial arts, about Asian actors, about people who got attention for dancing around instead of doing real stunt work. Sharon saw him coming and her smile faltered slightly, just a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Bruce Lee," Rick said, stopping a few feet away. His voice carried across the soundstage, loud enough that nearby crew members looked up. "The great martial artist everyone keeps talking about." It wasn't quite a greeting. It wasn't quite a challenge. It lived somewhere in that dangerous middle ground where deniability and provocation coexisted. Bruce turned to face him fully, his posture relaxed but centered. "That's what they tell me," he said evenly. Rick smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been hearing stories. Steve McQueen, James Coburn, half the stunt guys in town. Everyone says you're the real deal revolutionary technique. Fastest hands in Hollywood." He paused, letting the words hang. "Sounds impressive. People are kind," Bruce replied. "Kind," Rick repeated the word like he was tasting it. "Or maybe they're just being polite. You know how this town is. Everyone's always praising everyone else, whether they deserve it or not." A few more crew members had stopped working now, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the way animals sense weather changes. Sharon stepped slightly closer to Bruce, her expression tight. "Rick," she said, her voice carrying a warning. "Bruce is my guest." Rick held up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm not being rude. I'm just curious. I've done stunts on 3 continents, trained with boxers and wrestlers, taken hits from guys twice my size. When someone comes along claiming to have figured out some kind of ultimate fighting system, I get interested." Professional curiosity. Bruce's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had sharpened. He recognized this moment. He'd lived it dozens of times. The challenger who framed aggression as curiosity, the skeptic who dressed up disrespect as intellectual inquiry, the test disguised as conversation. Jeet Kune Do isn't about claims, Bruce said quietly. It's about function. It's about using what works and discarding what doesn't. "Sure, sure," Rick said, nodding as if he was seriously considering this. "But here's the thing. I've seen a lot of martial arts demonstrations, boards broken, bricks smashed, all very impressive looking. But boards don't hit back. Bricks don't defend themselves." He took a step closer, his smile widening. "In my experience, most of these Eastern fighting systems are more performance than practical. Great for movies, not so great for real confrontation." The soundstage had gone quiet now. Even the crew members who'd been actively working had found reasons to pause, to adjust something that didn't need adjusting, to check equipment that was functioning fine. Everyone could feel what was building. Bruce remained perfectly still. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "Experience is valuable, but so is openness to new information." "New information?" Rick echoed. "Right. So here's my information. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've trained with some of the toughest guys in the business, and in my professional opinion, a lot of what you're teaching is theory more than reality. It looks good. It's probably great exercise, but in a real situation..." He shrugged. "I have my doubts." Sharon stepped forward, her face flushed. "Rick, that's enough. You're being disrespectful." But Rick wasn't looking at her. He was focused entirely on Bruce, his expression challenging, expectant, waiting for anger, for defensiveness, for some reaction he could mock or dismiss. Bruce took a slow breath, his shoulders relaxed, his hands loose at his sides. Inside, he was making calculations that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with teaching. He'd faced this situation before, the skeptic who needed to be convinced, the challenger who was really asking to be shown, the student who didn't yet know he was a student. "You have doubts," Bruce said. "That's fair. Doubt is useful. It prevents blind belief." He paused, then added, "It's also a limitation if it prevents learning." Rick laughed, a short bark of sound learning. "Okay, so teach me something." He spread his arms wide, his smile now fully mocking. "Show me this revolutionary technique. Prove it works." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down on ancient stone. "Prove it." The demand every doubter makes when they mistake performance for truth, when they confuse demonstration for desperation. Prove it, as if mastery required their validation. Prove it, as if the burden of their skepticism should be carried by someone else. Bruce looked at him for a long moment. The sound stage had become a theater now, with an audience waiting to see how this would unfold. Sharon's hand was on Bruce's arm, a gentle restraint, a reminder that this wasn't worth it. But Bruce was thinking about something else. He was thinking about every time someone had dismissed his art as performance, every time a casting director had said he was too small, too different, too foreign. Every time someone looked at him and saw a stereotype instead of a human being, and he was thinking about teaching, because that's what this moment was really about. Not about pride or reputation or winning an argument. It was about whether this man in front of him, this skeptic who'd challenged him publicly, could learn something. Whether 8 seconds could change a mind that had been closed by assumption and cultural prejudice. "All right," Bruce said quietly. His voice carried no anger, no aggression, just certainty. "I'll show you." He glanced around the soundstage, his eyes scanning for what he needed. Near the far wall stood a heavy punching bag. the kind stuntmen used for training, hanging from a reinforced ceiling mount. It had to weigh at least 70 pounds, wrapped in thick canvas that had been beaten by hundreds of fists over countless sessions. Bruce pointed to it. "We'll use that. You'll hold it, I'll demonstrate." Rick's smile grew wider. This was even better than he'd hoped. A physical demonstration that everyone could see, could witness, could judge. Hold a punching bag? Sure, no problem. He looked around at the gathered crew. Playing to the audience now, this should be educational. They walked across the soundstage, the crowd parting to let them through, then following behind like witnesses to a duel. The bag hung still and heavy, its surface scarred from years of impact. Bruce stopped a few feet away, examining it with the focus of an engineer assessing a structure. Rick positioned himself behind the bag, wrapping his arms around it in a bear hug. His feet planted shoulder-width apart in a stable stance. He was 6'2", 205 pounds, with the strength that came from years of physical work. Holding a bag while someone punched it would not be a problem. Sharon had followed them, her face tight with concern. She knew Bruce's capability. She'd seen him train, had heard the stories from Jay and Steve and the others, but she also knew Hollywood, knew how these confrontations could turn into career-defining moments, for better or worse. The crew had formed a loose semicircle, giving them space but staying close enough to see everything. Among them was Gene LaBelle, the legendary stuntman and judoka, who'd worked with Bruce before. Who knew exactly what was about to happen? His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held anticipation. Bruce stood facing the bag, his posture relaxed but centered. He rolled his shoulders once, a small gesture of loosening, then settled into a stance that looked deceptively casual. Left foot forward, right foot back, weight distributed evenly. Knees slightly bent, his hands came up, not in fists but in open positions. Fingers relaxed, ready. "I'm going to strike the bag once," Bruce said, his voice calm and clear. "One technique. Pay attention to what happens." Rick shifted his grip, his arms tightening around the bag. "I'm ready. Do your worst." Bruce's expression didn't change. It's not about worst, it's about effectiveness. For a moment, everything was still. The soundstage, with all its artificial lighting and false walls and movie magic, became a space where something real was about to happen, where theory was about to become demonstration, where claim was about to become proof. Bruce took one small step back, creating space, measuring distance with the precision of someone who'd spent 10,000 hours understanding exactly how bodies move through space. Then he moved. 8 seconds is not a long time. 8 seconds is barely enough time to take 2 full breaths. 8 seconds is a commercial break, a pause between songs, the span between lightning and thunder. But 8 seconds can be eternity when it's filled with demonstration of human capability pushed to its limit. Bruce's right foot pivoted, his hip rotating, his entire body suddenly a unified weapon channeling force through a single point. His right fist launched forward in what looked like a simple punch. No wind-up, no telegraphing, just explosive release of energy. The impact sounded like a rifle shot in the enclosed space of the soundstage. The bag, 70 pounds of dense canvas and sand, bent around the force, its surface compressing like it had been hit by something far larger than a 135-pound man. The shockwave traveled through the canvas into Rick's arms, through his arms into his chest, and suddenly the stable stance wasn't stable anymore. Rick's feet, planted firm just a moment before, skidded backward across the smooth concrete floor. Not a little shift, not a minor adjustment, a full sliding displacement of 6 feet. His shoes leaving drag marks on the ground. His arms still wrapped around the bag but his entire body driven back by the transferred force. He tried to reset, to plant his feet again, but Bruce was already moving. 1 second had passed. The second strike came from a different angle, Bruce's left hand shooting forward in what martial artists call a phoenix eye fist, knuckles protruding in a precise configuration designed to concentrate force into a minimal surface area. It caught the bag at its center, and the impact rippled through the canvas like a stone thrown into still water. Rick grunted, his arms tightening reflexively, trying to absorb the shock. His feet slid another 3 feet, his boots squeaking on the concrete. 2 seconds. Bruce moved into a different stance, his weight shifting, and his right foot came up in a side kick that had zero wasted motion. The kick connected with the bag's lower half, and the entire thing swung violently to the side. Nearly tearing out of Rick's grip, Rick's upper body twisted, trying to maintain control, but the bag's momentum was now chaotic, unpredictable. 3 seconds. A punch with the lead hand, short and sharp, followed immediately by a spinning back fist that generated force through rotation. Each impact sounded distinct, not just thuds but cracks, sharp reports that made the watching crew flinch. Involuntarily, 4 seconds, Rick's face had changed. The confident smile was gone, replaced by concentration bordering on panic. His arms were straining now, his feet desperately trying to find purchase on the floor. But Bruce's strikes were coming from angles that made static defense impossible. Each hit drove him backward or twisted him sideways, destroying any sense of stable positioning. 5 seconds. Bruce transitioned into a hooking punch that curved around the bag's edge, his body weight dropping into the strike, and Rick actually stumbled, his left foot leaving the ground entirely for a moment. A gasp went through the watching crowd. 6 seconds. Another sidekick, this one at full extension, Bruce's body becoming a straight line of force from supporting foot to striking heel. The bag compressed so deeply that Rick's arms couldn't maintain their wrap. His grip broke, and for a fraction of a second the bag was floating free, suspended by the chain, before crashing back against him. 7 seconds. The final strike was a 1-inch punch, the technique Bruce would later make famous at demonstrations across the world. His fist started just inches from the bag's surface, almost touching, seeming to have no room for power generation. Then his entire body unified. Legs, hips, torso, shoulder, arm, fist, all coordinating in a chain reaction that transferred maximum force through minimum distance. The bag exploded backward as if it had been hit by a car. Rick, his arms no longer around the bag, his stance completely destroyed, stumbled backward and fell, his back hitting the concrete floor with a sound that made several crew members wince in sympathetic pain. 8 seconds. The soundstage was silent except for the creaking of the chain as the punching bag swung in chaotic patterns, still absorbing the kinetic energy it had received. Rick lay on his back, not injured but stunned, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the shock of someone whose understanding of reality had just been fundamentally challenged. Bruce stood in his finishing position for a moment, his breathing barely elevated, his expression unchanged. Then he relaxed, his hands dropping to his sides, and walked slowly toward where Rick lay. The crew members were frozen, their faces showing variations of the same expression, disbelief mixed with awe. Sharon had her hand over her mouth. Jean LaBelle was nodding slowly, a knowing smile on his face. Bruce extended his hand down toward Rick. For several seconds, Rick just stared at it. His mind was trying to process what had just happened, trying to reconcile the physical reality of those 8 seconds with everything he believed about fighting, about power, about what was possible. He felt every strike through the bag, felt how each one had come from a different angle with different energy, felt how his size and strength had meant nothing against the precision and speed and unified force. He'd been wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. Slowly, Rick reached up and took Bruce's hand. Bruce pulled him to his feet with easy strength. "Are you hurt?" Bruce asked, his voice gentle now, completely without mockery or triumph. Rick shook his head, still catching his breath. "No, just humbled." Bruce nodded. "Good humility is where learning begins." Rick looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without the filter of prejudice or assumption. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. "I was disrespectful. I made assumptions based on things that don't matter. Your size, your accent, where you're from. I let those things make me think I knew what you were capable of when I knew nothing." Bruce held his gaze. "You're not the first. You won't be the last. The question isn't whether you made assumptions. Everyone does. The question is what you do now." "I want to learn," Rick said immediately, "if you'll teach me. If you're willing to take on a student who started by insulting you." A small smile touched Bruce's lips. Every teacher was once a student who thought they knew more than they did. Some of the best students are the ones who had their certainty shattered and chose to rebuild with humility instead of resentment. He paused, then added, "But understand something. Jeet Kune Do isn't just techniques. It's not about learning to hit hard. It's about learning to see clearly, to move without ego, to respond without prejudice. Can you learn that?" Rick nodded, his expression serious now, all trace of his earlier arrogance gone. "I'll try. That's all I can promise." "Trying is where it starts," Bruce said. The crew was still watching, but the tension had transformed into something else. Not entertainment anymore, but witness to a genuine moment of transformation. Sharon had moved closer, and she caught Bruce's eye with a look of quiet pride. Jean LaBelle stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Kid," he said to Rick, "you just got an education that most people would pay thousands for. Consider yourself lucky." Rick managed a weak laugh. "Lucky isn't the word I'd use, but I take your point." He looked back at Bruce. "When can I start?" "Come to my school in Chinatown next week," Bruce said. "Tuesday evening, 6 o'clock. Wear clothes you can move in. Come ready to forget everything you think you know." "I'll be there," Rick promised. As the crowd began to disperse, returning to their work with the slightly dazed air of people who'd witnessed something unexpected. Bruce caught Sharon's arm gently. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. She laughed, shaking her head. "I invited you to meet Roman, not to give impromptu demonstrations of why people shouldn't challenge you. Sometimes teaching moments come in unexpected packages," Bruce replied. Rick Vandermeer showed up at Bruce Lee's school the following Tuesday at 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. He wore simple gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, and he stood on the sidewalk outside for several minutes before entering, nervous in a way he hadn't been nervous in years. Inside, the school was smaller than he'd expected, just a single room above a Chinese restaurant, with mirrors on one wall and training equipment that looked well used, but carefully maintained. Bruce was already there, working with two other students through a flowing sequence of movements that seemed to blur the line between fighting and dance. When the session ended and the other students left, Bruce gestured for Rick to approach. "You came?" Bruce said. "I said I would," Rick replied. Saying and doing are different things. Many people promise to learn after their pride is wounded. Fewer actually show up. For the next 2 hours, Bruce worked with Rick on the most basic principles of Jeet Kune Do Not techniques. Not yet, but concepts. How to stand without tension. How to move from the center. How to see without expectation. How to respond without ego. It was harder than any stunt work Rick had ever done. Not because of physical difficulty, but because it required dismantling habits built over years. Bruce was patient but exacting, correcting the smallest deviations, explaining the purpose behind every adjustment. "You're strong," Bruce said at one point, "but you use your strength to force instead of to flow. Strength is useful when it serves technique, not when it replaces it." Rick absorbed the correction, tried again, failed again, tried again. By the end of the session, he was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with muscles and everything to do with concentration. But something had shifted. He could feel it, the beginning of understanding. Like light starting to break through a crack in a door. "Same time next week?" Bruce asked. "Yes," Rick said. Then hesitating, he added, "Why are you doing this? Teaching me, I mean, after what I said to you." Bruce considered the question. "Because breaking someone's pride is easy. I could have done that in 8 seconds and walked away. But what would that teach? That I'm capable of humiliation? That I can win confrontations? Those are small lessons for small moments." He paused, then continued. "But showing you why you were wrong, giving you a chance to transform that wrongness into growth, that's a lesson that can last. That can change not just you but everyone you interact with afterward. That creates ripples instead of endings." Rick nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words. "Besides," Bruce added, a slight smile crossing his face, "you're Sharon's friend. She cares about you. That means something." Over the following months, Rick became one of Bruce's most dedicated students. He attended every class he could fit around his stunt schedule, and when he couldn't attend, he practiced alone, drilling the basics until they became reflex instead of thought. He also became something unexpected, an advocate. When other stuntmen made dismissive comments about martial arts or about Asian actors, Rick pushed back. When someone suggested that Bruce's techniques wouldn't work in real situations, Rick offered to demonstrate why they were wrong. He did it without aggression, without ego, but with the quiet conviction of someone who'd been on the other side and knew exactly how ignorance felt. On set one day, a director questioned whether Bruce could choreograph a fight scene convincingly. Rick pulled the director aside. "I've worked with coordinators on 3 continents," Rick said. "I've studied with some of the best fighters in the business, and I'm telling you, Bruce Lee is on a different level entirely. Not just in skill, but in understanding what makes movement look real on camera. Give him the chance. You won't regret it." The director took Rick's recommendation. Bruce choreographed the scene. It was brilliant, dynamic and realistic, and unlike anything the director had seen before. Word spread. More opportunities came. More doors opened. Slowly, incrementally, the industry that had seen Bruce as a sidekick began gradually to see him as something more. 5 years later, in 1972, Bruce Lee returned to Hong Kong and made a film called The Big Boss. It was followed by Fist of Fury and Way of the Dragon, films that shattered box office records and made Bruce a legitimate international star. When Enter the Dragon came out in 1973, shortly after Bruce's death at 32, it became one of the most influential martial arts films ever made. It opened doors for Asian actors, changed how fight scenes were choreographed, and inspired millions of people around the world to take up martial arts. Rick Vandermeer was in the theater on opening night, watching his teacher move across the screen with that same precision and grace he'd witnessed that afternoon on the soundstage. He thought about those 8 seconds. about how a single moment of demonstration had changed the trajectory of his life. After the film ended, he sat in his seat as the credits rolled, as other audience members filed out, still buzzing with excitement. He thought about all the small moments that had rippled out from that confrontation. The students he'd trained, the actors he'd advocated for, the times he'd chosen teaching over humiliation when he could have done either. Bruce Lee had lived only 32 years, but the lessons he taught would outlive everyone who'd known him. That afternoon on the soundstage, those 8 seconds that had demolished Rick's arrogance had been a pebble thrown into a pond. The ripples were still spreading. Here's the uncomfortable question you need to ask yourself. Who have you dismissed because they didn't look like what you expected strength to look like? Who have you underestimated because their background or appearance didn't match your assumptions about capability? When was the last time someone proved you wrong and you had the humility to admit it, to learn from it, to transform that moment from ending into beginning? Think about the Rick Vandermeers in your own life. The people who challenged you, doubted you, maybe even disrespected you. When you proved them wrong, what did you do next? Did you walk away satisfied with their humiliation? Or did you extend a hand down and offer them a chance to grow? Because that's the real measure of strength. Not what you do when you win, but what you do with the person who lost. Do you leave them broken in their defeat? Or do you show them how to build something better from the pieces? 8 seconds changed Rick Vandermeer's life because Bruce Lee understood something profound. Demonstrating capability is easy, but creating transformation is powerful. Winning an argument proves nothing except that you are right in that moment. Winning a student, though, turning skepticism into curiosity, arrogance into humility, closure into openness, that's how you change the world one person at a time. The lesson isn't just about martial arts or physical capability. It's about how we treat people when we have the upper hand, when we've proven our point, when we have every right to walk away victorious. Those are the moments when our real character shows. Those are the moments when we choose between destruction and construction, between endings and beginnings, between being right and being wise. Bruce Lee had 8 seconds to humble someone who disrespected him. He used those 8 seconds to demonstrate truth. Then he used the rest of his life to teach, to build, to create ripples that would outlive him by generations. How are you using your moments of victory? What ripples are you creating? What are you building with your strength beyond the satisfaction of being proven right? Those questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking, because legacy isn't built in 8-second demonstrations of capability. Legacy is built in every moment afterward, in every choice between destroying and teaching, between walking away satisfied and extending a hand to someone who needs help standing up. That's the real lesson from that afternoon on the soundstage. Not that Bruce Lee could hit hard. Anyone who'd seen him knew that already. But that he could hit hard and still choose mercy. That he could prove his point and still offer grace. That he could win the confrontation and still see it as the beginning of something rather than the end. That's mastery. Not of technique, but of character. Not of fighting, but of humanity. Not of 8 seconds, but of the infinite moments that follow when you choose building over breaking. Teaching over gloating, transformation over triumph. The question isn't whether you can win your battles. The question is what you build with your victories.